Hello, my friends. Let's talk about Ghost in the Shell. When we talk about an anime that is flooded with philosophy about the world, anyone with some history in the medium is going to give you a list of a few shows before all others. Shows like Cowboy Bebop, Evangelion, and of course Ghost in the Shell. I'll throw in a good portion of the Gundam franchise as well. Yes, there is a temptation to just name whatever shows we loved or the current most popular anime, but objectively, I believe we can all recognize how the classics and certain masterpieces reach these points of a virtue above the level of cool that is almost instantly gratified during every anime season nowadays. I want to attempt at capturing that virtue in the way that I believe I am most able. I am not an artist or an animator, a director, or a scientist, but I am a lifelong student of philosophy, a student of meaning. Something that I have been planning to do for a long time is to do an evaluation of Ghost in the Shell in the same way that I do for other anime in this series. Ghost in the Shell, however, has too much depth to it to be condensed into a poppy 10 to 20 minute bite. And I had this crazy idea in the back of my head that was so nuts I didn't actually let myself fully consider it. But I recently had a change. I discovered a podcast called The History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps, a very noble undertaking to neatly catalog and explain every mildly influential philosopher throughout time and within their respective cultures. An unbelievably difficult task to even attempt, and equally inspiring. Thus, the next large chunk of the PhilosAnime web series will be titled The Philosophy of Ghost in the Shell Without Gaps. So what do I mean when I say without gaps? I don't mean that this channel is going to drop every other series that I have been making. If I switch to only looking at Ghost in the Shell for the months of work this will take, I will drive myself mad. I aim to be fairly consistent with releasing this series, but I care more about doing due justice to each entry in the intellectual property. Keeping myself creatively fresh will be a big part of that. What I will be doing is starting at the earliest entry of Ghost in the Shell's animated body of work, and going forward, movie by movie, episode by episode, season by season. I will be treating each entry and reimagining of Ghost in the Shell as separately as possible, trying not to let my thoughts on the ideas of one iteration of Ghost in the Shell be assumed into my viewing of the other works. Where I see it as appropriate, or find myself capable of discussing in a meaningful way, I will also attempt to discuss the music of the show, the history of its production, and other factors that aren't necessarily reflected blatantly in the piece. Finally, despite what I just said, I will be putting my focus on what I believe is conveyed in the final product as a priority over any known intentions by the authors or creators of the works. People often seek out creators to give answers on the meaning behind their creations. But if I could expose my own hermeneutical bias, I believe that art takes on its own meaning once an artist is finished with it. It will have different meanings as it comes into dialogue with the experiences of those who view it. Speaking of my own attempts at creative work, I saw a massive disparity between the meaning I try to convey and the many meanings that are taken by others. As I believe with an argument or an idea, the thing expressed and the person who expresses it are distinct. Regardless of my analytical framework, I also want to expose a few thoughts on Ghost in the Shell that I will be going in with. First is the title itself, as a reference to the literary concept Deus ex machina, the god or ghost in the machine. It is any number of common tropes that come in near the end of a story that allow characters to get past the point of no return or the all is lost moment. It often comes in the form of some yet introduced divine favor, remembering some small bit of information from a character's past, or the beginning of the story, or any other widget that solves the story's main conflict. Second, changing the word machine to shell creates a different dynamic altogether. It harkens to the mind-body paradox in treating with the soul or psyche as being distinct from body or physical presence. The use of the term shell, however, suggests that the body is in fact empty, decomposed, or meaningless. And this brings in the issue of identity, and what it means to be a ghost within an empty, meaningless body. What it means to have an identity in a meaningless cultural context. From this perspective, I have always seen Ghost in the Shell and any property bearing the name to present a story such that the underlying or personal conflict of lacking identity in modernity propels a search for a sudden solution, a deus ex machina, that can solve the conflict, but putting that solution firmly in the hands of the machine itself. It is an attempt to solve the lack of identity in modernity through modernity. So now you have a fairly clear picture of the myriad biases and presumptions I will have going into this project. While I don't really strive to be unbiased in this, if you find yourself in my audience, I'd like you to know these biases so that you can better critique me and show me different perspectives with your comments. Thank you for watching this introduction video, even though there wasn't any real Ghost in the Shell analysis in it. I tried to tack some superficial stuff on the end, no idea if that was interesting at all, but I hope you'll come back and help me as I move through this process. The best way you can keep track of this series will be subscribing to the channel, of course, following me on Facebook and Twitter, and maybe Instagram if I've started doing that already. At the time of recording, I have no idea. If you're a lover of Ghost in the Shell, maybe go through each of these works along with me, share them with your friends, and continue the conversations with what I'm sure will be new converts to the fandom. I don't pay anyone to advertise the channel for me, so the only way that this channel can grow is with your help. Every new viewer tells me that you care as much about understanding philosophy in anime and video games as I do. So thank you again, and as always, stay true.